Today we will be covering the human evolution theories iceberg. From cannibal Neanderthals, stoned apes, and gay uncles, there is an incredible amount of wild theories surrounding our evolution. No AI slop was used in the entirety of this video. It was written and edited by real humans getting paid to tell the human story. So let's jump right into the first theory. Starting with layer 1, running made us human, properly known as the persistence hunting hypothesis. The idea that early humans basically ran their prey to exhaustion. This was first noticed by the Sand people of southern Africa. They would chase down big game animals such as kudu for hours during the hottest time of the day. No matter how fast the kudu may run, heat exhaustion eventually shuts down their organs, forcing the animal to collapse. At this point, an accurate thrust from a spear is enough to finish off the animal. The key to persistence hunting is human physiology. Unlike other animals, we have a deadly combination of sweating and bipedal walking. Sweating allows us to release heat from our body, and our furless skin allows this sweat to drip off of our bodies. We have 10 times more sweat glands than any other animal, most of which hardly have any. Our other advantage is our bipedality. While four-legged animals can almost always run faster than us due to more contact with the ground, two-legged walking is 30% more energetically efficient. This allows us to keep running for hours. In the case of the sand bushmen, their runs usually last 3 to 8 hours straight. This can cover well over the distance of a marathon, but what makes it even more impressive is this technique only works when it's over 105 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Paleoanthropologists hypothesize that this technique was employed by our early ancestors to hunt in extremely competitive ecosystems. The Sand people themselves are one of the oldest populations on Earth, separated by the rest of humanity by some 150,000 years. The persistence of this technique into the modern day suggests that it may have been with humanity since our origins. The invention of this method could have allowed our ancestors to get access to fresh carcasses they otherwise could not hunt with just simple spears. According to the persistence hunting hypothesis, this became our niche in our early origins, providing us with a hunting method no other predator could even attempt. There is no doubt that even Homo erectus could have practiced persistence hunting, but the problem is there's no real evidence. Critics claim such a hunt is incredibly taxing on your body and burns thousands of calories in hopes the hunt is successful. Simply ambushing prey would save energy, wear on the body, and effort. Most anthropologists accept that it is a valid strategy for hunting, but it may have been rarely used on old, sick, or young animals which are much easier to chase down. It is legitimately amazing that humans have some of the most endurance of any animal, an ability that is insanely fun to practice if you've ever done long-distance running. But there is another hypothesis that makes humans even more unique, the idea that it was actually throwing that made us human. Throwing is one of the most unique abilities humans possess. Sure, some other animals can do it, but most can only blindly toss with a little force. Humans, on the other hand, can efficiently direct objects with incredible force. A good throw can crack the skulls of most of the animals we evolved alongside. If a lion was threatening your group, a volley of rocks could be enough to repel an attack. And smaller animals can be reliably hunted simply by throwing a good stone. Ancient humans certainly relied on this ability for survival. Some have even suggested that bipedalism evolved in part for throwing. It freed up our arms for holding and throwing objects when venturing out on the savannah. This gave our ancestors a massive advantage over all other apes that had to scurry around on all fours. And we actually have evidence that early humans relied on throwing. A collection of 176 round stones found in Tanzania may have been used by hominins 1.8 million years ago. By measuring these stones, they found that they were deliberately selected and hoarded based on weight. One group clustered around 400 grams, and the other clustered around 220 grams. It is hypothesized that the larger ones may have been the ideal weight to be thrown by males, and the smaller ones the ideal weight to be thrown by females. If throwing stones was a common behavior used by early hominins, it makes sense that suitably sized stones were hoarded. Rocks were almost certainly the first projectile weapons used by our species. No other predator in the wilds of Africa could attack at range the way we could. So did throwing make us human? Probably not. But I do think it is far more important than most people realize. The next idea is that meat made us human. The idea is that the inclusion of meat into our diet spurred on the evolution of complex behavior, especially like hunting, and that this fueled the development of larger brains. While the idea at its face sounds like something the Liver King might dream up, there is actually some truth to it. Paleoanthropologist Brianna Pobiner hypothesized in a 2015 paper that saber-toothed cats living alongside Homo habilis would have left plenty of leftover meat on carcasses. From a zebra that lions had eaten, Pobiner found that 95% of the bones were abandoned with some meat on them. It is hypothesized that one already eaten zebra carcass could provide over 60,000 calories. This would have met the daily requirements of about 27 early hominins. Some of the meat was left by the lions because it was in hard-to-reach places between bones, and habilis could have hypothetically accessed this meat with tools. Another aspect of scavenging carcasses is the bone marrow in the brain. Other animals like hyenas and wild dogs can crack bones and access the marrow, but some bones are just too hard to crack. Luckily for our ancestors, a large rock is powerful enough to crack any skull or bone. The invention of stone tools gave us the ability to extract thousands of calories from animal carcasses. This gave us the energy to support large brains, which in turn would help us come up with new methods of acquiring calorie-dense animal carcasses. Most scholars are skeptical that the inclusion of meat into our diet was the main driver of our evolution, but it definitely played a significant role. Next, the idea that cooking made us human. And I promise it's the last made us human theory. Humans first harnessed fire over 1 million years ago. These fires were naturally occurring, but by keeping them going, we had warmth, light, and the ability to cook. Cooking breaks down tough foods, allowing us to digest them quicker and extract more energy. Our ancestors would have been accustomed to eating plants and animals that were caught in wildfires. Some plants are only edible after cooking due to certain organic compounds and physical toughness. Researchers in the 1900s hypothesized that cooking gave our ancestors access to many more calories, in turn fueling the growth of our big brains. But the problem with this idea is the lack of evidence. Evidence for fire usage between 500,000 to 1 million years ago is incredibly scarce. In fact, the ability to consistently create fire only appeared in the last 200,000 years with Neanderthals and our own species. We both use fire to great effect, but it likely played only a small role in our very early evolution, and became more important as we spread into colder environments. Next, we fast forward in human evolution. By 12,000 years ago, we had already settled into every continent for thousands of years, and every other species of human was extinct and the planet was now ours. Unfortunately, the poor megafauna were on the menu, and something big was about to happen. 12,700 years ago, the Ice Age would begin to come to an end. Over the next millennia, the world would get extremely cold during the Younger Dryas, and afterwards, 11,700 years ago, it would rapidly thaw, melting all of the glaciers and revealing the world that we live in today. This rapid and extreme climate change was difficult, but most megafauna had been through colder and warmer times before. What made this period different was our presence and our dominance throughout the world. Researchers have hypothesized since the 1900s that we systematically hunted the megafauna into extinction. At first, the Blitzkrieg hypothesis gained popularity. The idea that in the Americas, humans armed with advanced stone tools rapidly spread across the continent like the German Blitzkrieg, a lightning-fast advance hunting all animals in their way. The idea was of course controversial. Could hunter-gatherers really exterminate such hardy and resilient animals in only centuries? Proponents argued mammoth pregnancies lasted nearly 2 years. By killing one baby mammoth or their mother, the local population suffers dramatically. And this is true of the dozens of other massive herbivores like giant sloths and mastodons. Our ability to target not only the young but also prime-aged mothers was truly catastrophic for animals with slow reproduction rates. But critics argue that there is not sufficient evidence for a megafaunal massacre. Across North America, where millions of mammoths lived, there are only a dozen or so sites that directly show humans were hunting and butchering them. But this is actually statistically a huge number considering the scarcity of the fossil record. In 2026, most archaeologists and paleontologists are skeptical of the idea that humans were the main driver in the extinction of so many large animals. Polling found that most academics favor climate change as the main driver of their extinction, while human hunting consistently comes in second place. I tend to believe that we truly were the final nail in the coffin of many of these species. If not for us, I just believe that small populations could have rebounded, just like they had done countless times before. Again, the only thing really different this time was the presence of our species, so it's a hell of a coincidence. The biggest danger for ancient humans were not predators, but rather diseases and wounds they left untreated. But in the modern day, we don't have to put off getting medical attention. This is why this video is sponsored by ZocDoc, a website that allows you to book and keep track of appointments with ease. We have all had a nagging cough or pain that wouldn't go away that we've just put off from getting checked out. I was the same way. I moved to a new city and I had pain in my ankle that just wouldn't go away. And I kept putting it off until I found ZocDoc. It was super easy to give them my information and the problem I was dealing with. In 5 minutes, I had an appointment booked and got seen in only 2 days. Turns out I just needed a little bit of physical therapy and now I'm back to 100%. ZocDoc is basically a search engine for doctors. Over 150,000 providers across 200 plus specialties in all 50 states. And you can filter by insurance to find in-network doctors so you're not gambling on your bill. You can read real patient reviews, check out actual doctor profiles, and see real open appointment slots. Most bookings land within 24 to 72 hours. And you can even score same-day appointments and it's completely free to use. I know it may seem small, but clicking the link in the description is a huge step towards prioritizing your health. Head to ZocDoc.com/North02 to get started and check that appointment off your to-do list. Thank you once again to ZocDoc for sponsoring this video and for helping us all take better care of our health. Up next is one of the most hotly debated topics in all of anthropology. Where did our species actually come from? One idea has dominated the traditional narrative, the out of Africa theory. It's a pretty simple explanation. Every human on Earth can trace their ancestry back to an ancient population in Africa. In fact, we can probably trace our roots all back to a single African mother, who scientists call mitochondrial Eve. From there, human populations spread outward, eventually reaching every continent. This hypothesis hinges on 2 different timelines. The first wave of migrations took place around 2 million years ago. At this time, Homo erectus was the dominant hominin. They left Africa and even traveled as far as Indonesia. The second wave concerns our species specifically. Anatomically modern Homo sapiens appear in the fossil record in Africa between 200 to 300,000 years ago. By 200,000 years ago, we started to find Homo sapiens fossils in the Middle East and Mediterranean. A skull from Apodema Cave in Greece is the oldest example. It dates to around 210,000 years ago. But these early archaeological sites are believed to reflect failed attempts at dispersal. It wasn't until after 70,000 years ago that we were able to conquer lands outside of Africa and establish a permanent presence. And we know this today for a fact based on genetics. If you look at populations around the globe today, all non-African DNA originates from a single African lineage. It's known as haplogroup L3, and it's the mother branch of our species family tree. Think of it like a genetic signature passed down strictly from mother to child. Around 70,000 years ago, a woman carrying these specific DNA mutations lived in East Africa. It was her descendants who multiplied and eventually walked out of Africa for good. And this is pretty much indisputable based on multiple lines of genetic evidence. But the out of Africa theory's main opponent is the multi-regional hypothesis. It suggests that modern humans evolved from diverse populations across Africa and Eurasia, maintaining a single species through interbreeding. But genetic evidence has continually disproved the idea for decades. The out of Africa theory still remains the most widely accepted model of the geographic origin of our species. But one of the strangest things about being human is how much hair we don't have. For a lineage that evolved from hairy apes, our bodies are basically bald. So why did we lose so much fur while chimps and gorillas are still covered? The main idea was always that we lost our fur so we could sweat and it would help us with persistence hunting and other outdoor activities. But there is a more unsettling possibility. Imagine your body covered in thick hair, crawling with ticks, lice, and biting insects. Every night you go to sleep, those parasites feed, reproduce, and spread their disease. Now imagine a mutation that reduces that hair. Suddenly, those parasites don't have a home. To understand this idea, we have to picture the environments our early ancestors occupied. The grasslands and wetlands of ancient Africa were prime territory for ticks and blood-feeding insects. While traversing those tall grasses, ancient humans were becoming more social than any other primates. The conditions for spreading parasitic diseases were perfect, so shedding a lot of our fur was adaptive. It makes your skin more visible, which makes it easier to spot and remove parasites. Social grooming, which is common in primates, may have become more efficient on less hairy bodies. But notice how we still have hair where it matters the most. By keeping it around our head, face, and other bodily orifices, it acts as a final line of defense. It can slow down or stop a crawling insect before it reaches your eyes, mouth, or somewhere else. And the hairs are like tripwires helping us to detect these bugs crawling. Some researchers have even linked the timing of human hair loss with the evolution of clothing and the divergence of different lice species. This speaks to the deep evolutionary relationship between us, our culture, and these disease-ridden critters. But there are definitely problems to this idea. Without fur, we are very susceptible to the sun. So losing our fur was probably a combination of parasite defense, the ability to sweat, and social bonding. Now we're moving on to a much more insane idea, the stoned ape theory. It suggests that early hominins consumed psychedelic mushrooms, and that this spurred on our uniquely human cognition. It was popularized by ethnobotanist Terence McKenna in the 1990s. McKenna was an experienced psychonaut himself, but he believed this behavior was truly ancient. According to him, as our ancestors entered the grasslands, they started following herds of prey, and where there are herds, there is dung where psychoactive mushrooms thrive. By pursuing prey and possibly using their dung to track them, these ancient people could have easily experimented with shrooms. He argues that if it became a consistent part of the hominin diet, it would have had downstream effects on our brain function, perception, and behavior. The idea is that this would result in permanent changes over evolutionary time. To be clear, there is no direct fossil evidence that early humans were consuming psychedelic mushrooms, but they were certainly all over the environment and our ancestors would have been familiar with them. Modern proponents point to a few intriguing possibilities. Psilocybin is known to increase visual acuity at low doses. This would be helpful for hunting and foraging. At moderate doses, it enhances pattern recognition and can stimulate creative thinking. At higher doses, it often produces experiences described as meaningful or even spiritual. Some argue that this contributed to the emergence of symbolic thought, language, and religion. Modern neuroscience also shows that psychedelics can temporarily increase the connection between different parts of the brain. So did shrooms really make us human? Well, the stoned ape theory of course has a lot of criticism. The biggest issue is the lack of hard evidence. There are no archaeological remains, chemical residues, or clear indicators that early hominins regularly consumed psychedelic mushrooms. While psychedelics can alter perception, there's no solid proof that they can drive long-term evolutionary changes in brain size or intelligence. The theory is surely creative and out of the box, but it's ultimately speculative. Today, it sits firmly outside the scientific mainstream. Most anthropologists and evolutionary biologists do not consider it a serious explanation for the rise in human cognition, but it continues to capture public attention, and for good reason. Because it's hilarious to think about hominids eating shrooms all those years ago, and considering they were present all over the environment, Homo erectus was definitely tripping on shrooms. Whether this had any effect on their evolution? Probably not, but it's definitely funny. But we actually have plenty of evidence that other psychoactive substances affected our evolution. Excavations have proved that alcohol, cocaine, and marijuana have all been used since the end of the last glacial period. These substances all popped up at the beginning of civilization in their respective regions. Some have hypothesized that the mind-altering effect of these drugs may have been so enjoyable that it convinced these populations to settle down and pick up farming. For example, evidence for beer goes back to 14,000 years ago. It was first ground and brewed in a hole in a cave floor. Eventually, more complex shelters were created, and sites like Göbekli Tepe were used for huge feasts which included beer. The origins of civilization may have very well been coaxed along with the greatest incentive in human history: a pint of cold beer. This next idea might make you question your own sanity. What if the very traits that unravel the human mind into madness are the same ones that built civilization? I'm talking about schizophrenia. It's a psychiatric condition marked by altered perception, disrupted thought patterns, and sometimes a complete breakdown of reality. It's often seen as a disorder, but some researchers have started questioning this assumption. Could it have actually made our species advance? One thing about schizophrenia is that it's present in all populations around the world. Research suggests that up to 80% of schizophrenia cases can be attributed to genetic inheritance. This places it among the most genetically influenced mental health conditions. And from an evolutionary standpoint, that's pretty puzzling. Traits that significantly reduce one's chances of survival and reproduction are usually not selected for. So if schizophrenia is maladaptive, why would it be passed down from generation to generation? One proposed answer is that schizophrenia is actually beneficial for society. There's growing evidence that people with this condition or milder schizotypical traits often show heightened creativity. Studies have found increased rates of artistic expression, novel thinking, and unusual associations in schizophrenic patients. And if you zoom out and look at our species as a whole, we are inherently creative. We create complex and creative tools, we make up insane myths and even religions, and we transform our entire environment based on ideas. It makes you wonder how many technological and creative breakthroughs were conjured up in the mind of a schizophrenic. Obviously, schizophrenia can be very harmful to some individuals, and I don't want to romanticize a mental health condition. Most researchers today would not consider schizophrenia itself as an adaptation, but considering the genetic component, it's a little undeniable. You have to wonder what other mental conditions and aspects of our psychology are actually down to evolutionary fitness. Next is an idea that's equally disorienting. What if I told you an extinct human species may have evolved to live specifically inside of caves? The species is Homo naledi, and it was discovered in South Africa's Rising Star cave system. Plenty of other extinct species have been found in caves, but this one is different. It is yet to be found anywhere else. Rising Star Cave is the only evidence we have of their existence. The fossils here date to between 236 and 335,000 years ago. If we look at their unique anatomy, we see indicators that Homo naledi was tailored for this underground space. They were stout at just under 5 feet tall. They had curved fingers and flexible shoulders. These traits are typically associated with life in the trees, but they could have been extremely helpful for navigating the vertical shafts, narrow fissures, and jagged terrain of deep caverns. Rising Star Cave had plenty of obstacles. One section, called Superman's Crawl, is a horizontal tunnel where the ceiling drops to less than 10 inches above the cave floor. Another, called Dragon's Back, has razor-sharp walls made of dolomite. Finally, the chute consists of a 40-foot vertical shaft that pinches to about 7 inches at its tightest choke point. At the bottom of the chute is the Dinaledi chamber, where the remains of this species were discovered. To reach these depths required a compact and agile animal, and Homo naledi meets those criteria. But the darkness proved to be another challenge. The Dinaledi chamber is totally cut off from daylight. Emerging evidence suggests that Homo naledi controlled fire and possibly used torches to illuminate the cave. But the consensus that they evolved to live here is not unanimous. An alternate hypothesis is that the remains of this species were washed into the cave from flooding. That said, there is no evidence of flood debris among the bones, meaning it is likely that these individuals were carried back here, possibly buried. Considering Homo naledi looked very primitive and only had a brain the size of a chimpanzee, it would be pretty insane if they buried their dead, used fire, and lived in caves. Considering no other animal in Africa could have followed them that deep into the caves, they would have provided great protection, so perhaps there really was a cave-dwelling hominid. Our ancestors in Africa would have been familiar with Homo naledi, but another hominid we even bred with, the Neanderthals. Sapiens and Neanderthals walked the same valleys, hunted the same animals, and survived the same European ice ages. Then, around 30,000 years ago, one of them vanished. So why are we still here but Neanderthals aren't? It's unlikely a coincidence that they went extinct shortly after we left Africa and entered their territory. Many anthropologists believe our sapient ancestors brutally outcompeted Neanderthals, and possibly through direct conflict. Homo sapiens may have had some key advantages, including bigger and stronger social groups with more efficient tools and weapons. But Neanderthals were probably stronger individually. Some archaeological evidence suggests the replacement was rapid. In many regions, Neanderthal tool traditions disappeared shortly after sapiens arrived. These could be signs of our direct ancestors simply being better hunter-gatherers. But there are subtle indications that violence might have been involved too. It comes in the form of skeletal remains with signs of trauma. Shanidar III, a middle-aged Neanderthal discovered in Iraq, was found to have a spear injury to one of his ribs. The small, precise wound suggests that it was caused by a sharp projectile, probably launched from far away. Comparative analysis found that it matched more closely to the wound by a spear thrower than a hand-stabbed spear, and there's little evidence that Neanderthals used spear throwers. Sapiens, on the other hand, were at least making spear throwers by this time, and possibly even early bows and arrows. This leaves us with the frightening possibility that a member of our own lineage was the culprit of this ancient violent offense. This leaves us with the possibility that our species directly killed the Neanderthals. And considering everywhere we went the local hominids went extinct, it's possible that this pattern wasn't limited to Neanderthals. But there is a flip side to this tragedy. A more up-to-date idea is that these interactions were more peaceful and even collaborative. According to the assimilation model, Homo sapiens interbred with different archaic species as they migrated into Eurasia, including Neanderthals. The strongest evidence for this romantic twist comes from our very DNA. In 2010, scientists mapped the Neanderthal genome. When they compared it to modern humans, they found a bombshell. If your ancestry originates outside of sub-Saharan Africa, 1 to 2% of your DNA is pure Neanderthal. That sounds small, but it's enough to prove the point biologically. And considering how this genetic signal spans every continent, it represents a massive legacy. It means that interbreeding wasn't a rare or isolated event. It had to have happened repeatedly across different regions and time periods. But we can get even more specific than this. Modern research shows that there were mating preferences between the species. Male Neanderthals were more likely to mate with female sapiens, rather than the other way around. Even in prehistoric times, people were picky about who they mated with, and it remains a mystery why more Neanderthals mated with human females. New models of fossil data from France and Spain indicate that our species lived alongside each other for up to 2,900 years. This seems to favor the assimilation model, that we lived alongside each other for thousands of years until gradually blending into one. But since there were so many more Homo sapiens because our groups were larger and more social, the Neanderthals basically got bred out of existence. and this seems to be what the evidence points to as of now. They were likely more violent encounters with whole bands fighting each other to the death, but it seems in many cases it was more peaceful than we'd imagine. But now we are starting to get deep, covering one of the strangest ideas in human evolution, the aquatic ape hypothesis. All the way back in 1942, German pathologist Max Westenhofer proposed that human traits such as hairlessness, webbed fingers, and subcutaneous fat might stem from an aquatic phase in our evolution. Independently, a marine biologist named Alistair Hardy would come up with a similar idea in 1960. His idea was that early human ancestors may have been adapted to coastal life foraging in shallow waters. Hardy suggested that some features of the human body might make more sense if we had gone through an aquatic phase. My thesis is that a branch of this primitive ape stock was forced by competition from life in the trees to feed on the seashores, and to hunt for food, shellfish, sea urchins, etc. I suppose that they were forced into the water just as we have seen happen in so many other groups of terrestrial animals. I'm imagining this happening in the warmer parts of the world, in the tropical seas where man could stand being in water for relatively long periods, that is, several hours at a stretch. He further argued that a variety of human traits were best explained by this semi-aquatic lifestyle. We shed our fur to reduce drag in water, just like dolphins and hippopotamus. We gained a layer of subcutaneous fat to insulate us against cold aquatic environments. Our bipedalism developed from standing upright in waist-deep water. Our ability to hold our breath, something virtually absent in other primates, evolved not for speech, but for diving. Human infants automatically hold their breath underwater and can swim to some extent. This is claimed as a whisper of our aquatic ancestry. The use of stone tools was also hypothesized from using rocks to crack open shellfish. This group of ideas collectively made up the aquatic ape hypothesis. And personally, I had first heard of it from the 2011 series Mermaid: The Body Found. This show tells the story of a supposedly scientific team's investigation to uncover the source of a mysterious underwater recording and an unidentified body. The show also strongly presents the aquatic ape hypothesis to support the existence of mermaids. These apes were depicted very dramatically, almost like monsters foraging on the shore for millions of years. In the show, these apes continued to adapt to an aquatic lifestyle, eventually becoming veritable mermaids. I remember being fascinated by the show at the time, as I was only a kid and this was probably some of the first human evolution content I came across. In reality, this program is entirely science fiction. The scientists were all actors, and no, a mermaid body was not found. But besides the silly show, the aquatic ape hypothesis brought up many valuable questions about our evolution. First, let's address the idea that bipedalism evolved to wade in shallow water. When other primates enter water, they almost always walk bipedally, and it is actually really funny. While foraging, it would make sense to move on two legs in water. But the problem with this idea is that the first bipedal ape, Sahelanthropus, was actually arboreal. That's right, it seems to have developed the ability to walk on branches, as well as on the forest floor. Later in time, around 4 million years ago, with the appearance of Ardipithecus and Australopithecus, full bipedalism appears. The Laetoli footprints dating to 3.6 million years ago proves that our ancestors were walking on dry land just at this time. Species like Australopithecus afarensis, Homo habilis, and Homo erectus are all found in terrestrial deposits. Altogether, there is no evidence that these hominids were living in aquatic environments, and their bipedalism developed on dry savannas and woodlands. The next major form of evidence is our hairlessness. Proponents compare us to hippos, dolphins, and whales. Less hair means less drag in water, but the problem is that plenty of other terrestrial animals don't have fur either. Elephants, rhinos, and pigs are fully terrestrial, and their hairlessness correlates with having a large body size in hot climates, just like us. The MC1R gene suggests that humans only lost their fur an estimated 1.8 million years ago, which does not line up with some aquatic phase. Homo erectus was clearly a fully terrestrial species, making it apparent that our lack of hair appeared unrelated to any supposed aquatic phase. Other aspects such as our subcutaneous fat can easily be explained by other causes. But the infant dive reflex is the funniest of all. At first it seems compelling that infants naturally know how to orient themselves when thrown into water. They even have a bradiocardic response which slows their heart rate and redirects blood to their vital organs. However, this reflex is not unique to humans at all, and it is widely known as the mammalian dive reflex. Literally every mammal has the reflex, meaning it developed millions and millions of years ago and has persisted in every mammal. Overall, there is little to no evidence supporting the aquatic ape theory. It is possible that some of our traits are influenced by time spent in water, but that is about all you could claim with current evidence. But now we are questioning consciousness itself with the bicameral mind theory, the idea that human consciousness developed remarkably recently. If you go far back enough in time, you must reach a point where that voice in our head fades away. You know, the one that you read everything in? Yeah, we all have that same voice. And according to psychologist Julian Jaynes, it's the byproduct of a mind split into two. In the 1970s, Jaynes proposed his bicameral mind theory. He argued that early humans didn't have internal monologues. Instead, one part of the mind generated auditory hallucinations, while the other obeyed them. These hallucinated voices were perceived as gods, ancestors, or divine authorities, so they didn't recognize their thoughts and emotions as their own. They seemed to originate from an external source. He drew upon ancient texts to support this idea. In epics like the Iliad from ancient Greece, characters are almost puppet-like. They don't weigh options internally. Gods tell them what to do, when to act, and how to feel. Early languages also lacked words for introspection, suggesting people may have not always experienced inner thoughts the way we do. So what we hear in our heads now is the breakdown of that ancient split. As societies and language grew more complex, that internal voice was internalized. The split merged into one. But of course this theory is highly controversial. It relies too heavily on literature with little support from biology. Even so, it is fascinating to think about that little voice in our head we think with. Like, obviously mine speaks English. So what would it be like in another language? What would it be like before language even existed? These are legitimately interesting questions concerning ancient humans. But now we are moving into a much more physical oddity. Anthropologists in the 1900s noticed that modern human brains are a lot smaller than the brains of our Ice Age ancestors. And for decades, researchers have been asking why. Over the past 30,000 years, the human brain lost a chunk of matter the size of a tennis ball. Fossil records show brain size peaked during the Upper Paleolithic. The volume of Homo sapiens skulls averaged to about 1,500 cubic centimeters. Some Neanderthal skulls were as large as 1,840 cubic centimeters, while the modern average even for males is around 1,300 cubic centimeters. That's at least a 10% decrease. The leading explanation? Human cognition has largely been outsourced to society. Alone in the wilderness, you must know how to make a fire, identify edible plants and animals, predict weather, avoid predators. But in more recent societies, people often specialize in one of these tasks and they can rely on others to accomplish the rest. With the rise of technology and writing, humans began storing information outside of our heads. We don't have to cram the entire knowledge of our community in our heads anymore. And biologically, huge brains actually waste an incredible amount of energy. From an evolutionary perspective, a smaller specialized brain is much more efficient. It makes you wonder how an Upper Paleolithic human would perform in cognitive tests in the modern day. Would they be the jack of all trades and a master of none? Or would they be stupid? I guess my brain is too small to critique our ancestors' intelligence, though. Next, we are moving on to Allen's rule, one of my favorite evolutionary phenomena. It is a biological principle stating that warm-blooded animals in cold climates tend to have shorter limbs and extremities compared to animals living in warm climates. This is simply because of physics. Having less surface area helps animals retain heat, and this can be easily seen when comparing jackrabbits to Arctic hares. You could not have those big-ass ears. You could not have those big-ass ears in the Arctic, and they need squatter bodies in order to stay warm. And this rule applies to basically every warm-blooded animal, even ourselves. Populations living in extremely cold climates like the Inuit have the shortest limbs out of any population. This minimizes their surface area, allowing them to stay warm. The opposite can be seen in East Africa with the Dinka people. They evolved extremely long and thin limbs that maximize skin surface area, allowing them to dissipate excess body heat easier. Next, we're moving on to humans are still evolving, which is actually quite a big topic. Human evolution has never truly stopped, and humans in the modern day have changed tremendously since our origins in Africa. One of our most annoying changes is the shrinking of our jaws. Early humans ate raw, tough foods that demanded intense, consistent chewing. But ever since we started farming and processing our food softer and softer, our jaws have been getting smaller. This forces many of us to get our wisdom teeth removed. These teeth used to be absolutely necessary to chew roots, crack nuts, and process tough meat. But jawbones develop in response to mechanical stress, and most people never use their jaws hard enough to make room for their wisdom teeth, leading to crowding, which can be disastrous for your teeth. Roughly 30% of people in the modern day are born without wisdom teeth at all. This genuine evolutionary change helps prevent crowding within our jaws. I, however, was not so lucky. But not all of our evolutionary changes are so annoying. Some are real-life superpowers. Meet the Bajau people, a sea-going group from Southeast Asia. They literally live on the water and make their living diving deep to retrieve food from the sea floor. For decades, they have been known for their unparalleled freediving abilities. But recently, it was found that this isn't simply a result of training, but a genuine evolutionary advantage. A study found that their spleens are up to 50% larger than other populations. Spleens help them store and release oxygen-rich red blood cells, similar to that of diving mammals. They have a distinctive version of the PT10A gene, which is believed to be associated with spleen size. This allows them to dive over 230 feet and hold their breath for over 10 minutes straight. Research suggests that their genetic advantage developed in only the past 1,000 years, proving that evolution even in modern humans can happen relatively quickly. Perhaps we were too harsh to the aquatic ape theory after all. Next, let's quickly cover some of the other insane evolutionary changes that only specific humans have. Tibetan populations carry a gene called EPAS1, inherited from the extinct Denisovans. It allows them to use oxygen efficiently at altitudes where most humans would struggle to breathe. Instead of thickening their blood like lowlanders do when they visit high elevation, their bodies keep it thin and keep the oxygen flowing. And this is why Sherpas can sprint up mountains that leave trained climbers gasping. Another strange oddity are the African pygmies. Their populations evolved an average adult height of under 5 feet tall, and it happened independently in groups separated by thousands of miles across the continent. Their small size may help them traverse dense jungle environments, and the leading evolutionary theory points to a sensitivity to growth hormone, a trade-off that may have let them mature faster and reproduce earlier in life. It's really weird that they evolved to literally mature faster than everyone else. But what about lactose intolerance? Most mammals lose the ability to digest lactose after infancy, which means these mammals and also humans that are lactose intolerant can't really drink milk. But once we domesticated animals, it became extremely advantageous to drink their milk. And with a single mutation, human populations were able to now digest milk. And that mutation turned out to be so useful that it developed in 4 different regions around the world independently. I myself am definitely a milk enjoyer, but something I never want is malaria. But some populations in Africa have actually evolved a natural defense against it. If you carry 1 copy of the sickle cell allele, you get significant resistance against malaria. But unfortunately, if you carry 2 copies, you could develop sickle cell disease. But what's weird is that Mediterranean populations also evolved a completely different mutation, thalassemia, which helps them be more resistant to malaria. It's interesting to see how 2 different mutations in 2 different parts of the world evolved to solve the exact same problem. Proof that natural selection is constantly looking for workarounds for deadly diseases. And another example of this is arsenic poisoning in the Andes. Communities living in the Andes Mountains have been drinking water naturally contaminated with arsenic for thousands of years, and their bodies adapted right along with it. Genetic studies show these populations process and excrete arsenic far more efficiently than the rest of us. But by far the strangest example of recent evolution are the blue people of Kentucky. In the early 1800s, a couple settled in the remote hills of eastern Kentucky. Both looked completely normal. Neither had any idea that they were carrying a rare recessive gene for a condition called methemoglobinemia, which messes with the body's ability to carry oxygen and turns the skin a deep shade of blue. On its own, the gene does very little, but if 2 copies miraculously meet, it can turn your skin completely blue. And against all odds, Martin and Elizabeth were both carriers. When they had kids, 4 of their 9 children were born with this strikingly blue-tinted skin. But this would have ended with the next generation, if they didn't live in the middle of nowhere. Back then, traveling out of such a small town was extremely difficult, and with such a small pool of people, they had to marry cousins and distant relatives. Generation after generation, that recessive gene kept getting passed down, and recombined with this tiny isolated gene pool. By the 1900s, blue-skinned babies were a regular recurrence in this community. But luckily, their condition was eventually cured, and more people moved into the town, causing blue skin to fade away. But it stands as an incredible example of how rare genes can quickly lead to evolutionary changes in only decades. If that happened early in our evolution, maybe we'd all be blue. But now we are pivoting to an even more niche idea, the gay uncle theory. Yes, this is indeed a real evolutionary biology concept. First of all, evolution is all about passing on your genes. so the existence of exclusively homosexual-oriented individuals challenges traditional biological ideas. The gay uncle hypothesis posits that homosexual individuals support their nieces and nephews, ensuring their success by providing them with care and resources. Though they may not be their own children, they still share 25% of their DNA, so their survival ultimately passes on their own genes. This could explain the evolutionary origins of homosexual individuals in our species and in the animal kingdom. Homosexual relationships are extremely common among hundreds of species of animals, and in some species such as swans, male partners will adopt, abandon eggs, or reproduce with a female just to get offspring, then raise it with their male partner. Up to 25% of Australian black swan pairs consist of two males. Because males are larger, they are better able to defend their own territory. And because of this, they have a chick survival rate of around 80%, compared to the male-female chick survival rate of only 30%. With this example in mind, you can see how evolutionarily, homosexual behavior can still be very advantageous, and clearly played a role in the evolution of our species. Another hypothesis seeks to explain a similar topic: the evolution of menopause. Menopause is the biological stage when menstruation stops in women, meaning pregnancy is no longer possible. For years, it was a bit of a biological mystery why evolution would throw away the ability to create more offspring. But the grandmother hypothesis came up with an answer. As mothers age, it becomes more difficult and more dangerous to reproduce. Cutting off their ability to reproduce gives them more time to care for their children and grandchildren, ensuring the survival of their genes without further reproduction. It is a bit strange to think of your grandmothers as a long-term strategy of evolutionary fitness, but ultimately everything is about evolutionary fitness. Now we are moving on to a truly incredible topic. Did Homo erectus use boats? Across Southeast Asia, Homo erectus inhabited dozens of isolated islands. Many of these were separated by miles of open ocean, even when the sea levels were far lower. The only way Homo erectus could have made it to these islands was by swimming over a marathon distance of open water. Water that had crocodiles, sharks, and deadly currents. This has caused researchers to theorize Homo erectus may have been capable of creating watercraft. Simple floats made of logs or bundles of coconuts could have done the job. More complex dugout canoes could have been possible. Other species like denisovans even made it further into Southeast Asia than Homo erectus, and possibly into Australia. They too may have possessed simple seafaring technology. And that brings us to our next topic, late surviving denisovans. Denisovans were once present all over Southeast Asia, and they may have been one of the last surviving human species. Individuals from Papua New Guinea and some other islands have over 5% Denisovan DNA. This is remarkably high, and suggests that Denisovan survived in this region longer than any other ancient lineage. Sediment DNA proved that Denisovan survived until 30,000 years ago even in the Tibetan Plateau, while in Southeast Asia, genetic evidence suggests survival as late as 15,000 years ago. Entire islands of Denisovan seem to have survived until the end of the last ice age. It is so wild to think about coming across an isolated island with a completely different species of human on it. But what if other species of humans were once more widespread than we realized? Could Neanderthals have made it all the way to the Americas? This is one of my favorite ancient human theories. Current evidence holds that modern humans made it to the Americas some 20,000 years ago, and no other hominid ever stepped foot on either American continents. But during warmer periods, Neanderthals could have simply walked into North America, as the giant ice sheets did not block their entry at this time. The Cerruti Mastodon site is the most famous possible early human site in the Americas. It consists of mastodon bones seemingly broken by round hammerstones lying next to them. If this was found in Europe, it might be labeled a Neanderthal site. But dating back to 130,000 years ago, it predates any human activity on the continent by over 100,000 years. This site is extremely controversial, with some scholars concluding it really does represent ancient human activity, while most disagree with this conclusion. The site could certainly have been made by natural forces during their deposition or even by the excavators that accidentally discovered the site. For this reason, it is certainly not concrete evidence, but I will keep my mind open for future discoveries. By far the most insane Neanderthal theory I have ever heard is the Neanderthal predation hypothesis. The idea that Neanderthals hunted and ate our ancestors. An independent researcher proposed that the mainstream depictions of Neanderthals as intelligent human beings were completely wrong. Instead, they were covered in fur, had extreme physical strength, and an appetite for human flesh. According to his hypothesis, early Homo sapiens weren't competing with Neanderthals for territory. They were trying to survive against relentless Neanderthal predation. This threat forced our species to advance, creating more complex tools and tighter social bonds, leading to our eventual domination. While this idea would make a compelling novel, it is entirely baseless. The researcher lacked any knowledge of anatomy and just depicted Neanderthals as monstrous as he could. Furthermore, there's absolutely no evidence that Neanderthals ever hunted or consumed Homo sapiens. Ironically, there is more evidence that it was our own species that was butchering Neanderthals. At some sites, butchered Neanderthal remains are found in Homo sapiens layers. Maybe we were the bad guys after all. But now we're moving on to a theory that will genuinely blow your mind. A theory to explain dreaming, one of the strangest aspects of consciousness. For years it has been thought that dreaming is a random product of REM sleep, but now several theories have emerged. The most intuitive is that dreaming simulates threatening or traumatic events. It trains your brain to react for when terrible things actually happen. Our ancestors lived in an environment full of poisonous snakes, deadly lions, and elephants which could stomp you into the ground. If you panicked or froze in fear, your life could end in a moment. So dreaming gives our nervous system an opportunity to simulate these threats and react to them in a safe environment. Therefore, when you encounter the real danger, you are able to react coherently. We all have had dreams where something truly horrible happens, and they really do feel like our brains are running a simulation. This has to be one of my favorite human evolution theories I have ever heard, and it really changed the way I think about dreaming. Philosophers have long debated the idea of free will, the idea that you control your thoughts and behaviors. But a parasite called Toxoplasma gondii shows us there's often another driver behind the wheel. It causes an infection called toxoplasmosis, which is one of the most widespread diseases on Earth. And this parasite may have been living inside of us for thousands of years. Evidence of the infection has even been found in Egyptian mummies. Today, roughly 1/3 of the global population carries it, and usually without noticeable symptoms. Its physical effects are often mild, but its influence on behavior is terrifying. Toxoplasma depends on its host to survive and reproduce. It can infect any warm-blooded animal, but it can only reproduce in cats. Cats spread the infection in their feces, which then contaminates cat litter, water, or sometimes food. When rodents ingest contaminated materials, the parasite forms cysts in their tissue. Infected rodents lose their instinctive fear of predators. They become slower to react and are even drawn to the scent of cat urine. It's an adaptation by the parasite that increases their chances of being eaten. This manipulation is thought to involve changes in brain chemistry, particularly dopamine, which affects risk-taking and attraction. If that newly infected individual is eaten by a cat, that parasite can reproduce again and complete the life cycle. Humans are not the target, but we are deeply entangled in this cycle. As early humans began domesticating animals and storing food, they created ideal conditions for Toxoplasma to survive. Agriculture and dense settlements attracted rodents and brought humans closer to cats. We can become infected through contaminated water, unwashed produce, undercooked meat, or just exposure to cat feces. This is why pregnant women are warned not to clean up cat litter. The parasite can lodge in the human brain and cause several behavioral changes. Studies have linked Toxoplasma to slower reaction time, including risk-taking, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and OCD. Some research even suggests infected individuals are more likely to be involved in car accidents. Whether these effects are the result of direct evolutionary manipulation or simply the byproduct of similarities between rodent and human brains remains unclear. The idea that Toxoplasma influences our fondness for cats is still debated. But one thing is clear. Humans have helped turn Toxoplasma into one of the most successful parasites in the history of evolution. But something even scarier to consider is that our species is only around 300,000 years old. Compared to the 4 billion years of life on Earth, our fleeting existence is more fragile than we'd like to admit. And our genetics tell us that humanity almost went extinct. Twice. The first close call happened around 900,000 years ago. A brutal climate shift struck the planet. Global temperatures plummeted, ocean currents changed course, and severe droughts expanded. This was long before Homo sapiens, so it would have affected species like Homo erectus or Heidelbergensis. These pre-sapiens ancestors faced a catastrophic 98% population crash. For over 100,000 years, fewer than 1,300 breeding individuals kept our entire lineage afloat. This is called a genetic bottleneck, and from this era, the fossil record goes almost completely dark as well. Hardly any human remains from this window have been found. Yet, against all odds, this tiny group survived. During this extreme crisis, a massive shift occurred in their DNA. Two ancestral chromosomes fused together, creating human chromosome 2. The event physically altered our genetic identity and paved the way for Homo sapiens. Some believe the control of fire is what saved us from this extinction. But there was more to come. A second crisis arrived just 50,000 years ago. For years, scientists blamed the eruption of the Toba supervolcano for this second population crash. But new fossil data from East Africa proved that the climate remained relatively stable. The true bottleneck was actually caused by us. As small bands of Homo sapiens ventured out of Africa, they took a massive gamble. Genetic simulations show how these pioneering groups were incredibly tiny. They sometimes consisted of fewer than 100 people. Walking into harsh, unfamiliar landscapes with a small gene pool made them highly vulnerable. A single disease or bad winter could have wiped them out entirely. Each group ran the risk of going locally extinct themselves. So rather than one massive collapse from a supervolcano, we brought ourselves to the brink of what we could handle, almost spreading ourselves too thin. And to see what happens when that gamble fails, we can make a comparison to our Neanderthal cousins. While humans maintained a genetic safety net in Africa, Neanderthals in Europe were isolated. Their low genetic diversity and severe inbreeding likely caused debilitating skeletal defects and other illnesses. Their biological toolkit ran out, which ultimately influenced our ability to outcompete them. We're likely here today because of the diverse populations that stayed in our African homeland, and maybe a dose of biological luck too. But don't take it for granted, because the next catastrophic event could be waiting around the corner. But now we're moving on to a really trippy theory. Have you ever noticed that humans essentially look like baby chimpanzees? Well, some evolutionary biologists have, and they actually have a name for this idea: neoteny, or neotenization theory, a bizarre evolutionary process where a species retains its youthful, baby-like traits straight into adulthood. Instead of growing up, our physical development slowed down, allowing us to reach reproductive maturity while keeping a baby face. Think about a baby chimpanzee. It has a flat face, large eyes, and a bulbous skull. As it grows into an adult, its jaw protrudes, its skull flattens, and it becomes rigid. Neanderthal fossils show a similar pattern. Our skulls, however, never truly outgrow that baby phase. Anatomically, your adult skull looks shockingly like a chimpanzee fetus. We keep our flat faces and our skulls stay round. Our lack of thick body hair and large expressive eyes also point to this prolonged neotenization process. But the real evolutionary superpower that comes with this is inside of our heads. By stretching out our childhood, evolution granted us a massive window of brain plasticity. Our brains stay flexible and hungry for information for decades. A chimpanzee reaches physical maturity at around 14 years of age, while for many humans it's around 20 years. And this is a big advantage. It allows us to learn and master language, culture, and complex tools. We became the ultimate learning machine because our childlike curiosity never fades. But remember, this is just a theory. It could very well be oversimplifying things. Modern anthropologists warn against looking in the mirror and seeing a giant toddler. While their faces look youthful, our long legs and dexterous hands are signs of hyper-developed adult traits. So we're not entirely neotenic, but our face and our brain certainly are. But another even more insane theory is the idea that we domesticated ourselves. Traditionally, domestication requires a master, and we're typically the masters, breeding wild wolves into loyal dogs among a bunch of other animals. But this theory argues that Homo sapiens did it to themselves too. Thousands of years ago, as our ancestors packed into larger social groups, aggressive alpha behavior became a liability. Coalitions with weapons could shut down a tyrannical leader with ease. Evolutionary pressure began favoring mates who were cooperative, tolerant, and gentle instead. We essentially weeded out the bullies, and the implications of this are massive. By selecting for friendliness, we unlocked the domestic syndrome. This is a package deal of biological changes. Look at the famous Russian fox experiment. When scientists bred wild foxes strictly for tameness, the foxes changed physically too. Their ears flopped down, their snouts shortened, and their bodies became more juvenile. And the exact same changes may have happened to us. Compared to robust Neanderthals and other human species, modern humans have flatter faces, smaller teeth, and softer and more gracile skeletons. We can also see this in other primates, primarily bonobos. They are close cousins of chimpanzees, having split into two species about 2 million years ago. While chimps rely on aggression to solve conflicts, bonobos use social bonding and cooperation. This includes grooming and a whole lot of sex. Importantly, bonobos display the same domesticated physical traits as us. It proves that self-domestication happens naturally when a species values peace over power. Well-respected anthropologists like Richard Wrangham are huge proponents of this idea. But not everybody is sold. Critics argue that comparing humans to livestock isn't a fair parallel. They point out that domesticated animals suffer an immense drop in brain volume when they are domesticated, up to 30%. While human brains have shrunk, they haven't seen this significant of a decrease. There's almost no doubt that we domesticated ourselves to some extent, but clearly the results ended up being a little different because there's no one directly domesticating us like when we domesticate other animals. But now, we're stepping into the uncanny valley theory, hands down one of the wildest entries on the list. In the 1970s, a Japanese roboticist noticed that the more human-like a robot became, the more people felt empathy for it, at first. As it crossed a certain line, people felt discomfort, revulsion, and even fear. The effect dipped into what he called the Valley of the Uncanny. People felt the same way about wax figures, prosthetics, and CGI characters. Something about these faces triggered an automatic response. Instincts this strong and universal don't arise by accident. They evolve because at some point, they kept our ancestors alive. If we go back to the origins of humanity, 2 million years ago in Africa, we were surrounded by other human species, and creatures you could mistake for your own. Our Homo erectus ancestors would have encountered Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis. Close relatives, but distinctly different. These hominids were constantly competing for food and territory. It was in their best interest to take out their rivals, especially if you were alone. Mistaking a group of habilis as your family while returning from a hunt could be the last thing you ever do. But we also shared the landscape with very different lineages. Small-bodied Australopithecines were still around 2 million years ago. These guys were pretty weird looking, with brains the size of a chimpanzee but standing completely upright. Seeing one of these guys sneaking around at night would have been uncanny to say the least. Other species like Paranthropus may have been more passive observers of our day-to-day lives. Some researchers have likened them to the cows of the human lineage, built for eating mass quantities of plant matter. They wouldn't have directly competed with us, but their presence must have been strange. But other primates in Africa were much more terrifying. The giant baboon-like Dinopithecus was truly nightmare fuel. They had massive canines and large males could even weigh over 170 pounds. The dog-faced primates would have looked eerily familiar, but repulsive. The uncanny valley theory posits that our instinct to be afraid of bad CGI characters and robotics is an instinct from these times, one that helped us navigate a world filled with real monsters. But some of these lineages carried on for millions of years, way longer than researchers ever thought possible. The evidence came not in the form of bones, but the DNA of modern humans. Geneticists identified extremely ancient lineages and populations in West Africa and Southeast Asia, and in neither case did they have fossils from these lineages. This caused the creation of a new term, ghost hominids. Hominids we still carry with us in our DNA, but have no physical remains of. The African ghost hominid was only discovered in the year 2020. By comparing the DNA of 4 West African populations to the DNA of Neanderthals, they found a contribution from a completely new group. The hominid appears to have split off with our lineage even before our split with the Neanderthals. For example, we split off with the Neanderthals roughly 600,000 years ago, while it seems this hominid split off closer to 800 to 900,000 years ago. The estimates found that between 2 to 19% of their DNA was from this hominid, sparking headlines around the world. But that's not actually what the paper said. It said that the average was a little over 6%, while the range between 2 to 19 is just a mathematical estimate. Still, 6% of their DNA is a significant portion, and we know almost nothing about who these hominids were. They were only found in populations living in West Africa, not East, Central, or South. This suggests these ghost hominids were likely from this region, and that they survived here until the past 50,000 years or even later. In many ways, you can think of them as Africa's Neanderthals, a related species that survived near the end of the last glacial period before interbreeding with us. Hopefully we get a fossil of them soon. Over in Southeast Asia, there is evidence that another ancient hominid bred with our species. For a long time, it has been known that populations of Homo erectus survived here as recently as 100,000 years ago. But the DNA of Denisovans found that they actually bred with these archaic hominids. Their DNA then made it into our species when we bred with Denisovans. Populations in Southeast Asia actually have the highest levels of total ancient human DNA on Earth. Some Melanesians have nearly 9% total DNA from Neanderthals and Denisovans, with some percentage of this DNA belonging to the ghost hominid, which of course we don't have physical evidence for yet. We will undoubtedly discover more ghost hominids in the future, and others we will find remains for and hopefully even put a face to the name. This is a truly exciting time in paleoanthropology, with insane finds coming out of East Asia and Africa every year. Don't be surprised when we discover a new species within the decade. That will wrap up the human evolution iceberg. This has been a great video, I really enjoyed making it, and if you guys want to see more iceberg style videos, comment down below what I should cover next. I was thinking about maybe like a Neanderthal iceberg or Ötzi the Iceman iceberg, I don't know, tell me. And shout out to Evolve.2 for helping with the script for this video. He makes similar content to me, so go check him out. In the meantime, YouTube thinks you'll want to watch this video. It's just like this one, but 1,000 times better.